Let's cover another not very good commentary on me. Specifically, the video Pokesonic Legend did a few months back on my commentary on Lavender Town. The first almost 6 minutes of the video is an intro sketch, and that's not a problem in of itself. I want to be clear, the length of the sketch is not one of my problems with it. It can be as long as it needs to be. However, a problem I do have with it is that it's too serious to be silly, but also too silly to be serious. What we have is a very quiet intro sketch, primarily made up of the characters talking with some very calming music in the background. Then we get things like this.
I'll be back, and when I return, there shall be no memes in the general chat.
Yeah. Sebastian, make sure Hound King can't come back here easily.
Yes, my lady.
No.
It just doesn't fit, for lack of a better term. The serious nature, which even bleeds into the really cartoony bits, make them feel out of place. I'd recommend going harder in one direction or the other. The intro sketch also sets up the fact this is going to be a co-op between Poke and the character Sebastian from the anime and manga series Black Butler. I've never seen Black Butler, and as such, I'm unable to really determine if the representation of this character is faithful or not. But I will make the point that, judging by this commentary, the only real personality he has is being as condescending as humanly possible, while throwing needless jabs my way. Take this clip as an example.
Well, my dear Ephraim, have you tried applying the principle of critical thinking to the context of the image? Because you said you would, and I'm not yet seeing it.
I hate it here.
I just want to point out that what I played was an entire interjection. Poke stopped the video just so a character from Black Butler could insult me. From an argumentative standpoint, it was one step above going, lol, you're dumb. I want to be clear, it's not even that this is all Sebastian does in the video, it's more so the only thing that really differentiates him from Poke is he insults me more. Still, this appears to be his first appearance on Poke's channel, so I'm not expecting him to have a fully fleshed out character right off the bat. Even if you're borrowing from an already existing source material, it's still going to take a while for your work to show the character as fully fleshed out. There's only so much you can do in a first appearance, after all. But okay, let's get into the commentary proper. Before I continue, I should note that I am not an artist, nor am I an OC maker. I'm just basing my critiques off of common sense and what I understand about concepts like story structure, as well as what an audience member would typically pick up on.
Alright, let's play a little game of keep this in mind for later, because the statement ultimately isn't the most accurate descriptor for how Ephraim argues in this commentary. And while I'm not going to sit here and say non-artists so people don't create OCs can't discuss topics such as character design, it doesn't exactly bode well for him to admit out of the gate that he isn't the most knowledgeable on the subject matter.
That's not quite what I said, though. I merely pointed out I'm not an artist nor an OC maker, which is totally unrelated from my level of knowledge. Sure, that does mean I don't have the raw experience of doing these things, but times creating something has nothing to do with knowledgeability on the topic itself. For example, if somebody is a bad artist or a bad OC maker, we would understand that although this person is experienced in making art and OCs, they aren't very knowledgeable on how to make a good one. So why is the reverse unable to exist in your worldview? I don't get the conflation here. I also want to point out, the video I'm covering is supposed to be a tutorial, also known as what those who don't have knowledge watch to get it. I shouldn't need a great amount of knowledge to understand what Lavender Town says in the video I'm covering, because it's specifically designed for people who lack knowledge. And none of this is even getting into the kind of elitist attitude I feel like you're perpetuating here. Not helped by the fact that in your final thoughts you say my video needed more input from artists and OC makers before offering yourself up as somebody who'd be willing to work with me on future projects.
At most, it was just a video that needed a bit more time in the oven, and maybe some more input from artists and designers. So hey, if you want some insight for the next time you decide to tackle a video like this, I'm more than willing to help out.
Which, side note, can I discuss that piece of advice for a second? Because you say I need more input from artists and designers. Okay, which artists and which designers specifically? Because those groups are not monoliths. And if I attempt to go to multiple people within those groups for advice, I am going to almost certainly come back with contradictory opinions and information. An example of this can even be seen in the video I'm covering that gives me this advice. Poke, you're an artist and OC maker, and yet you consistently disagree with artist and OC maker Lavender Town. So which artist and/or designer should I take input from here? Do you see my issue with this line of reasoning?
Now, theoretically speaking, he could do his own research on the topic to have a better understanding going in. But as we'll see in a short while, the likelihood of him having done that is rather questionable, to put it simply.
Oh, okay, so you understand the problem with the logic that was just presented, but are still keeping it in because you think the commentary wasn't very good. So, what was the point of Poke's interjection again?
Now, the more astute among you might notice that this thumbnail includes warnings that your OC may be both too boring and too much. Too much of what? I'm not entirely sure, but that's another topic. However, the concept of an OC that's too much isn't actually really mentioned at any point in the video. It's all advice for how to not make your character boring, but not on how to stop yourself from creating too much. The closest we get is a warning that if you put too many scars on a character, it will cause said scars to take over the character's story, and possibly cause people to constantly say hello to my little friend anytime they come across that character. Okay, I made up the second one.
If they're covered in scars, that's going to take over their story.
Lavender Town jump scare.
Okay, but in all seriousness, I'm gonna stick a pin on the clip used because what I have to say is gonna be more relevant later on. Yes, I know, I also asked you a different thing Ephron brings up in mind for later in the last interjection, but both these things are gonna lead into some of my biggest problems with this commentary. That being said, I do actually have something to say about what Ephron says here. For one, we haven't even started the original video, so it's a little funky to, claim something about it preemptively with no real context or substance. You know, what we in the industry call jumping the gun.
Okay, I just bluntly don't get the issue here. I described what Lavender Town was going to say, and then I played her saying it. You say there was no real context, but there clearly was. Lavender Town's thumbnail included examples of OCs that were too little and too much, and this was the only part of the video where the concept of an OC being too much was ever elaborated on. At least, that was the impression I was under at the time. I should note that Poke does play the following clip later on from Lavender Town's video.
The next thing you want to think about is what they actually like and dislike. Now, this is an obvious thing, and a lot of people when they first get into drawing their OCs do think about this. In fact, I used to be in the habit of listing my character's favorite and least favorite everything, literally down to their favorite type of tea, their favorite ice cream flavor, really granular stuff. I actually recommend not going too hard in that direction. You can really get caught up in details that would never be relevant.
And says the following about it.
Also, this is another instance of her specifying what could be seen as too much of her own video after all.
However, this is too much in an entirely different way than what I was talking about before, because it's clear too much there was in reference to the design of a character. And Lavender Town even says these likes and dislikes are never going to be relevant to the character in question, therefore making it clear they almost certainly aren't going to impact their design. And what about what I said was jumping the gun? I show the evidence for it being the case immediately after describing the clip in question, so I really don't get what you mean here. And side note, if what I did was jumping the gun, what was with what Sebastian did one interjection ago? You know, this part?
Now, theoretically speaking, he could do his own research on the topic to have a better understanding going in. But as we'll see in a short while, the likelihood of him having done that is rather questionable, to put it simply.
He essentially says a potential counter-argument against the claim Poke is making is invalid because later on I'll show myself to be not knowledgeable on the topic being discussed. How is that not jumping the gun, but what I said was? This doesn't make any sense.
Now, it was brought up during scripting that this was the result of Ephron doing a non-linear commentary, and thus this was him effectively starting to cover the video. The problem with this line of logic, however, is that after this point, the rest of the video is gone through in a standard, more linear fashion.
Well, yeah, at the beginning of the commentary, I'm covering my bases in a way I don't need to as the commentary moves forward. I was specifically breaking from the linear structure for the sake of this point in order to get it out of the way. And that just so happened to be the only time it was required in the commentary.
Besides, even with that bit of context, it still came off as jumping the gun due to him making the claim prior to playing any part of the original video. A timestamp or two to demonstrate which parts you're covering at any given time would be a simple fix for future reference.
Again, that's just not what that phrase means. What I was doing was segueing into the clip in question through describing what was in it. Also, what would adding timestamps have to do with if I jump the gun or not? You just throw that in at the end without any attempt to connect it to the point you were previously making.
Secondly, what does too much mean? I don't know. Judging by the image of the thumbnail, it could mean too many colors, too many random details, you know, the whole design shebang. Remember, kids, this is why context is important.
Doesn't the fact that you have to speculate as to what too much means prove my point? I was saying that Lavender Town never explained it in the video itself. Sure, I could theoretically use context clues and speculate as to what that means, but I would still expect something that's half the thumbnail to make some sort of major appearance in the video I'm watching. Oh, there's also this fact, which you play immediately after this interjection. Honestly, I'm not even sure what the issue with the design labeled too much even is. It's visually interesting, and it does a good job both telling me the character's current emotions and presumably giving me a decent idea as to what the character is like. Yeah, even if you think the thumbnail speaks for itself, there are still inevitably going to be people who don't immediately understand the problem with the design labeled as too much. And again, the video in question is supposed to be a tutorial, meaning it's specifically aimed at people who very well might not even have enough information to understand what is inherently wrong with either of the designs in the thumbnail. That is why Lavender Town is making this video, isn't it? So people who don't understand what is inherently wrong with those designs don't accidentally end up replicating them? What you're criticizing me for here essentially boils down to you disliking that I'm saying a video which serves as a tutorial should be acting as a tutorial. That doesn't make any sense.
The first thing I'd like to suggest is giving them more verbs. Now, what does that actually mean? So, whether you're writing your character into a book or whether you're like drawing them or just making an OC, a lot of the times people kind of focus on one aspect of their character. Like sometimes it's their job, like let's say that there's a knight or they work in an office or something. Sometimes people don't go much farther than that. So the key thing that you want to think about is making sure to give them more verbs, which basically just means like other things that they like to do. This can be really helpful when you don't really know how you want to draw them, you just feel like you want to draw them. If you know their hobbies and stuff, it can be a lot easier to like figure out their pose and the things you want to draw them with. What sort of accessories and things that they are attracted to can be sort of controlled by what they like to do. So giving them things that they like to do other than just their main thing, whatever their main job is, can really make them feel more fleshed out.
I'm skipping through a joke here. Oh, by the way, I should let you all know, Lavender Town drags out her points way more than she needs to. I put that clip through the timecode feature in Sony Vegas, and it was 1 frame short of 56 seconds for what essentially amounted to give your character hobbies. Well, on the topic of her presentation, she also talks in this fairly whispery voice, and the music occasionally gets loud enough to where it starts to drown her out. It's not a particularly big deal, but it is noticeable.
Oh, great. An interjection purely dedicated to production issues. And they're vague as all get out. Yay. Let's start with the point is dragged out for too long thing, because I can definitely understand if you felt Lavender's point was either too wordy or over-explained. The problem, however, is that you don't really explain why you felt her point dragged out for too long beyond a vague notion that 56 seconds was too long for a point that boiled down to give your characters hobbies.
Well, yeah, because I felt the inherent juxtaposition between how long it took Lavender Town to make her point versus how long it took me to summarize that same point spoke for itself.
Which ignores the concept of elaborating on said point to make it better advice for the audience.
But that's not what Lavender Town did. Outside of the advice itself, the most that was discussed was the benefits of doing what Lavender Town suggested. But that's not the same thing as elaborating on the advice itself. Had she, for example, discussed how you would give your character hobbies, or told her audience ways they could help think up hobbies for their characters to have, then this point might have some weight behind it. To put it another way, this point essentially criticizes me for failing to take into account something that didn't happen. Anyway, that's all I want to cover, so final thoughts. This video really didn't do anything to debunk my points. Although there were some okay arguments I cut out, the vast majority of the commentary really isn't doing anything that debunks what I've said. And the constant conflations and arbitrary standards don't help make this video any better. Good night, and good luck.